Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, last night you yourself, along with colleague John Dallett, had organised and hosted an event about the Great Famine, and I commend you for doing that. A major event in our history, one that we should never forget. And we shouldn't forget it because in the immediate aftermath of the Great Famine, 1 million people died, 1 million people travelled to other parts of the world, and many of those people died on coffin ships, or even if they did reach places like America, they received, in a lot of cases, a very hostile reception. Many others went on and did very well, and their families and subsequent generations ended up in very prominent positions in places like Washington, D.C. We, on the other hand, Mr. Speaker, many years later, haven't learnt that lesson, that we need to have open and welcoming countries for people who are in deep and real crises. If America, for example, had have been closed to Irish refugees, and that's what they were refugees, what would have happened to all those people? People were dying in the ocean. People are dying in the ocean now, Mr. Speaker, in 2015. It isn't good enough. The founding values of the European Union, one of those founding values was about the protection of human dignity. I'm not so sure the scenes around the borders of Hungary are living up to that particular founding value. And I think there needs to be sanctions on European EU countries who do not live up to those values, because it is a stain on the reputation of the European Union that instead of opening our arms to people who are fleeing brutal conflict, we close the doors and fire tear gas at them. I don't think that's something that we need to be, that we can be proud of at all. It's something we should be very, very ashamed of, and I think all of us as European citizens need to respond to that. And I know that in places like this city, and my city, and places all around the north, we've had demonstrations of people who have said that refugees are welcome in their homes. That's an illustration of the character of the people of this place. Even though we all have great difficulties here, there's 4,000 people on the waiting list for houses in Derry. People in Derry are still saying, "Come here, we'll look after you, we'll open our arms to you," because they understand the difficulties that people are going through. And I was criticised the last time this debate was, we had a matter of the day on this issue a couple of weeks ago, and I was criticised for making a political speech, and people told me it wasn't about politics and it's only about a humanitarian crisis. Well, these people aren't fleeing an earthquake, Mr. Speaker. These people are fleeing a man-made crisis. Whether it's the evil of Assad's regime, or the evil of ISIS, or the stupidity of Western governments and their interventions in places like Iraq, we have helped create this crisis. We need to help solve the problem as it stands, Mr. Speaker. So, you know, and that day as well, the First Minister, if that's what he still is, had made a comment about 5 minutes before I rose to speak that the Executive wouldn't be meeting. We have a responsibility in these institutions to, in whatever way we have to. I know that a lot of these issues are reserved, but we have a responsibility in whatever way we need to and have to meet as an Executive, to act in whatever way we need to act, and allow the Executive to make those decisions. But they can't make those decisions if they don't even act, if they don't even meet as an Executive. The people out there are calling on, I think, the politicians up here, whatever our other difficulties, but to act on this particular issue, to be to the forefront of showing the compassion that's required to meet these refugees with open arms, to ensure that they're not living, if they do get this far, in destitute conditions, like some of our recent refugees actually are living at the minute. So I would just call once again, because this is a political issue, Mr. Speaker, there are many major geopolitical implications for all of these things, but right now we have an Executive that isn't meeting, and we have responsibilities. Our responsibilities aren't as large as the UK government's or the Irish government's or anybody else's, But we have responsibilities, and we cannot meet those responsibilities unless this executive meet. And I would encourage the First Minister to change his attitude to that. Thank you.